Dilbar, Khalilova. Today I'm going to be the moderator of this free webinar, and let me introduce our speaker, Dipti Rane. Thanks, Dipti, for accepting our offer to be a speaker in our free webinar. Please tell us something about yourself.
Thank you very much, Dilbar. It is my pleasure to be here with all of you. I am seeing a lot of people join, so a lot of people excited. I can see some of them typing in, so that's a good place to start. And before I start introducing myself, let me just quickly share my screen so that you can see it. So can you all see my screen now? Like, can you see the slide up here?
Yeah, it is seen. You can start.
Perfect, great, wonderful. So again, once again, thank you very much. It's my pleasure. Last time I was speaking in Azerbaijan, it was in person, and this time it's virtual. That the world changed from then to now, and I really hope I can come back to your very, very beautiful country again. So let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Dipti Rane. I am right now the co-founder and partner for Talent at Work, which is an organization based out of UAE and is an education management company which handles global associations in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia region. So I come with over 12 years of global experience, specifically in the business of HR. And I'll specifically say business of HR. It's talent development and human capital as well. And prior to setting up, this is, I would call it my dream company right now that I'm working for, along with my business partner who shares similar kind of passion like mine. And prior to this, I was working with the Society for Human Resource Management, where I served as the Associate Director for SHRM's operation in the Middle East, North Africa, and the CIS region, which is where I became so close to Azerbaijan. I've launched and managed SHRM's business in India, in Asia Pacific, in China, in the entire Middle East, North Africa region. I've handled certifications, educational programs, have worked with a lot of different organizations. I've got an opportunity to work with so many different types of organizations, multicultural workforce as well. And prior to my experience at SHRM, I was working with the US House of Representatives, where I got my congressional recognition. So that was my government experience. So I hold my PHRi certification from HRCI, the SHRM-SCP certification, as well as the PMQ credential from SHRM. And I have my MBA from the UNL, which is the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Once again, salam, welcome, and I'm happy to be with all of you. And today's topic is going to be something which is so close to me, that's change and HR for change. And before we start talking and we set the pace for this webinar, I want you to engage with me throughout this webinar. So please, this is a discussion. I don't want it to be a one-way conversation. So we will start with a poll. I want you to take out your mobile phones if you're not if you're using your mobile for the webinar, go to this website, which is menti.com, and use the code, and you can vote for your poll here. So I just want to see for the group that's here, if your organization has gone through a business transformation in the last 12 to 18 months.
Is it possible to share the link in the chat box?
Yes, we can do that. So I'm just going to type it out here. Okay, so if we can just go to menti.com, I've put the link up there. enter this code and please vote. And while you vote, we are going to look at the results here. Here you go. Now, hopefully you can see everyone participating. We'll give a little bit of time for people to participate, but it's obvious sometimes, you know, it's interesting we got an answer as no, because we think that in the last so many years that we did go through some changes, and everybody thinks, oh yes, it was a tough year, we did go through changes, but you'll be surprised how some of the people did not go through any change, and that's amazing. Well, yeah, unsure as well. Sometimes we don't know if we are going through a change or not as well, or we are unaffected by it. So I'll expect more people to, will keep this open for another 30 to 40 seconds. So again, if you are unable to, just go to menti.com, insert the code 9514640 and place your vote.
Can you please post the code in the chat box? Everyone can take from here.
Sure, we can do that. Here we go. So great. That's an amazing
study. Thank you.
Yeah, I love this statistic, right? Because the way it moves, and when you see that a lot of people are unsure of whether you went through a business transformation or not, it just, when we go through this webinar, you'll figure out why people are unsure as well. Okay, perfect. We can come back and look at this statistic again in a short while. But if you look at that, we'll use the statistic again later on. But if you see, you will see that a lot of people have answered that, yes, our business went through a transformation. Some of them said that, no, we are unsure. Some of them said no. So it was a tricky year. We went through tricky things. So change is there, but sometimes we recognize it or we don't, right?
So I think that we can start with our first question. So we know that change management notion happens in every kind of business sphere. What is change management itself in general, and why do businesses need to make changes in order to survive?
Sure, and that's a wonderful question, Dilbar, because that's where we have to start with, is what is change? And for that, I would say the first thing we all need to do is look at yourself, right? And this is something which I really find very close to myself, is this quote where it says that when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves, right? And you will see that in your daily lives. Every day we are faced with challenges, and if we cannot change that situation, we always try to transform ourselves. So rightly said, change begins with yourself, and it's very similar to organizations as well, and our roles as HR as well. So let's look at what do we mean by organizational change, right? So change is something where in a business, something has, a component of a business has altered. So something has happened which caused you to alter something within your business. So it's a transformation, right? And what is that something that has changed? It could be culture, it could be your team structure, it could be your processes, policies, technologies, infrastructure, right? And it's not necessary that change has to be big. It has to be something. If you look at what has happened in the past couple of years, the spotlight on change only came because of the pandemic. But really speaking, we were going through changes even before that. Every time you were hiring new staff, every time you were reorganizing your business, we were going through a change. Every time, even if you were getting new technology into your business, we were going through a change. So technically, change is made of two larger buckets. One, which is adaptive change, which is incremental. So these are the smaller things that we don't notice sometimes in a day-to-day life. And the other one is transformational change, which is what we experienced in the last 18 to 24 months. We experienced a transformational change, which is large. That's like the pandemic, right? So we talked about change. So what is change management? So every time you leverage this change to bring something to make sure that your business is still working perfectly, that is change management. So you are adapting to this change, that's change management. And you have to make sure that when you adapt to this change, your business still continues to run the way it was. It is still successful, it is still doing what it needs to do, right? And if you don't handle it effectively, you can face a lot of losses, right? You will incur expenses, you may incur loss in terms of your talent that you will end up losing. So handling change effectively is very, very important, and that's why. And that process is technically what we call as change management. Now, change management traditionally could be something which is preparation, where you prepare for the change, you implement a change management model, and you follow through that model and you'll be done with it. But what we went through in the last year or so, that was not something that would work, right? We couldn't have prepared for it because it came without knocking on anyone's door. We couldn't have implemented whatever we had because it was random, and we couldn't have followed through because we are still in that situation, aren't we? So right now, the change management model is going to be more action. So are we taking actions? So when the pandemic hit, did we take actions? What actions did we take to make sure that we were holding on to that change? Movement. Were we moving along constantly with that change? Were we taking actions as well as moving along? So that's agility, resilience. Were we holding on to that? And finally, momentum. Are we still keeping through that momentum? Do we have that adaptability where we keep changing and we keep going through action, movement, momentum all over again? And it could be every week, it could be every month. So it's not a one-time process that we are going through, rather it's an ongoing process, change management. Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for this information. So as we know, during the last 2 years, businesses have faced a lot of changes due to this pandemics. So in what ways does this pandemic affected companies all over the world, and are there any best practices to handle this kind of changes?
Yeah, and that's such an amazing question, Dilbar. And while we speak, I will ask our audience up here also is tell me what challenges did you face? I would love to hear from you, because the challenges are so different that everybody faced during the pandemic over the last 2 years. And when I was talking to different people from different countries and different companies, each person has a different type of challenge and they had a different way of handling it. So if you want to put something that you feel is, okay, I faced this, I did not think that this challenge will come up, feel free to just type it in the chat box and I'll read it in a short while. So like we said, because the pandemic hit, the need for change accelerated much more than it was. We were going through an uncertainty, right? It was something we did not expect here. So let's look at some work and workplaces changes, right? Because the changes are not going to be only specific to one thing and not to the other. Sometimes we feel the changes are something which has to be done organization-wide because everything got affected, yes, but it affected the way we work and also where we were working. How many of you are still working from home? Are we working from home, or we have just started going back to work, right? We worked from home for the largest amount of time this time.
So here, I want to add here something. In our country, most people have options. Some companies give us option to work from home and sometimes to come to the office, but most people, yes, return to the workplaces.
Amazing. And that's, again, something, by the time we come to the end of this presentation, you will be surprised for something that I will tell you, and you'll be very happy and proud about it, and tell you why. But let's look at the way we work. So reimagining the purpose and meaning of our work, right? We don't work the way we were working or we were thinking about our work before. And let me give you an example here of a company here in the Middle East. It's called MAF, which is Majid Al Futtaim, the organization which actually owns Carrefour, which is a major grocery store or retail chain here. So what they did was they have a lot of different units of their business. So they have the entertainment business, the leisure, the hospitality, the retail. And what they did is when the pandemic hit, people were no longer going to movie theaters, nobody was using entertainment and leisure, everything was shut. So they actually repurposed the roles of those people who were working in the entertainment business to something that was essential. So was groceries essential? Yes. Was going to a department store essential? Yes. So instead of just shutting off the business, they just repurposed their roles and they took them over to where it was needed the most. So that is reimagining and repurposing your work. Another example is Aramex. Have you all heard about Aramex as a courier company? Right, so it's a global courier logistic company. And what they did was they normally do, it's like a DHL or a FedEx, right? So what they normally do is they would put your packages or send your packages from one country to the other or one state to the other. But during that time, because nobody was sending packages that way, they partnered with the government and they started delivering goods and essential goods to people's houses, not just in the UAE, but also in Australia, right? So that is, again, repurposing their work is you have some talent, let's reuse it somewhere else for a reason that we need now. At the same time, we helped our employees overcome social isolation. How did you feel when you were working at home alone? You did not want to do that at one point, right? So that we were getting into an isolation. We challenged ourselves to become leaders. There were a lot of companies that started decentralizing their operations. People started making decisions in smaller units and hubs. So everyone was a leader. We were motivating our employees. We were increasing our trust in them. Didn't you feel that you started trusting your colleagues more when you were not seeing them face to face in person? So that's the way we work literally changed. Let's look at where we work. We started having flexibility, remote working. We also, now that we are coming back, do you see some sort of reinvention of workplaces so that we can still collaborate and we are still safe? And again, if you have examples where your organization has reinvented in some way or has got some sort of innovative things to make sure that you feel safe at work, that's amazing, because having that type of reinvention is so necessary right now. And I'll give you an example of Google. Everybody knows Google, right? So everybody knows Google. And we know even before the pandemic, Google was known to have great type of offices, right? Do you remember that? Google had these amazing kind of seating areas, these nice collaborative workplaces. So it was there. And what they did now is to make sure that people come back to work. They have something called as a balloon wall, right? Which is very amazing. So they have walls with separate employees and they look like balloons so that you are still safe. You still feel happy at work. They also have private bots like robots that you can talk to and that you don't face real people very close to it. You can still maintain social distancing. They have campfires so that people can work outside in an open door environment rather than inside. So companies are continuing to rebuild their workplaces. And some companies are preparing for long-term remote work. LinkedIn, for example, they just gave an option. And like you said, Dilbar, the companies are giving options to employees. Do you really want to come to work or do you want to continue working remote? If it is possible. And a lot of people ask me, I want to work from home, but you know what, I work in hospitality and service industry. No, that does not work, right? So these requests have to be reasonable as well. So there is a question. I think we will take this question a little bit later because it kind of relates to something else that I want to mention. So Sema, we will definitely take your question right in a short while. And let's look at some change management trends as well. So because we went through all these shifts, the trends of change management also went through a shift. So what are some of the new change management trends that we are expecting or we are looking at or we are even going through? So one is you have to make sure that your change management models are matured enough. What does that mean? It means that one size does not fit everyone. So what works for example, FMCG industry may not work for an airline. What works for an airline may not work for oil and gas. What works for oil and gas may not work for energy. So we have to make sure that whatever change management approach you are taking or whatever model you are using, that it fits your purpose, that it fits your industry. The second trend we have to make sure is you are taking care of your remote employees. We all know we have now remote employees. Not everybody is back in the office. Maybe everybody's still back in the office, but they are working flexible. So we have to start focusing on the data. And when we say data, what data are we looking at? Let's look at, as HR, we can look at, are your employees happy? Are your employees okay to come back to work? Are they feeling safe? What is their productivity level? After they came back to work, are we tracking them as managers or as HR? So that's the data you have to keep looking at, and that's the trend you have to keep looking at. Digital first workplaces. How many people figured out how to use Zoom only in the last 12 months? I did. I did not know Zoom worked this way and it had that many features, right?
So, WebEx, Zoom, this kind of platforms, everyone learned about them during this pandemics.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the companies have to adopt that technology. We cannot say today, I hate my smartphone. I hate my smartphone too, but I have no option anymore. If I don't have my smartphone, I cannot connect to the world. So how are you adopting that technology at your workplace? How are you making sure your organizational culture is modernized? What do you mean by that? Is we always had a specific type of a culture, but how are you making sure that culture is adaptable? How are we making sure that we are focusing on employees first, their emotional well-being, so that they can service your end users or your end customers? So one example I want to give is a company called HCL Technologies, which is based out of India, but they have head offices in the US, they are in Europe, and it's a very large technology company. And they have a concept which surprisingly came in even before the pandemic, way before, 10, 15 years back, was a concept called EFCS, which is employee first, customer second. And the reason the leadership pushed for this concept is because they realized that being a technology company, they couldn't use technology for their own employees, and it did not make sense. So you have to make sure you're keeping your employees' emotional well-being in the forefront, their mental health in the forefront. And finally, the trend that I personally vouch for every time is agility and continuous improvement. You have to be agile. There is no option or no second option for it. Everything that you are doing right now, your improvements, it's a learning. It has to be a constant journey. You cannot come, fix something and then move on. And you have to make sure that you're constantly assessing your needs, your organization's needs, your employee needs, and there has to be a continuous improvement. So that's what I think, Dilbar, these are some trends. Again, these are trends which we as Talent at Work started looking at and putting together from different sources. So happy to share them later on as well as a reference guide.
Thanks a lot. So we are going to have a poll, but before this poll, I want to take the points in general. We see during this change management practices during pandemics, we started to look at things in a different way. And we saw that actually workplaces could have been more flexible before. And we could see this kind of things after things happened. It was somehow reactive. I wouldn't say that was proactive. So we started to look at things differently and everything has changed. Today, some businesses even started to enter different markets. In your example of this company that's taking parcels from one place to another, they changed their market actually.
Yes.
New insights it brings to companies, a new way of communication and new actual businesses.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And our topic today is the role of HR in change management. We understood actually what the change management is and what kind of practices we can face in change management in our daily business lives. But what is the role of HR in change management? Is there a space for us to be involved?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I'm guessing that almost all the people who are here watching us right now have something to do with HR or are HR practitioners. So before I answer that, I want all of you again to get engaged with me in another poll, and it is going to be somewhat related to the previous poll. Okay, so again, go back to, it's the same one. So yeah, just go back to your menti.com and use the same code again. And here is your question is, what was the impact of this change on you as a professional? Right? So it does not matter what level of HR are you in. You just have to tell me, did it really impact you if there was a change? Or were you only affected? Or did you do something to make that change happen or implement that change? Or did you just sit and watch it happen? Or it's like a movie sometimes, and it's okay. But what was the impact of this change on you as a professional? So we'll give it a bit of time for people to answer. So again, it's menti.com. Thank you for posting it. The code is up here. Yep.
I dropped it in the chat box.
Yes, it is in the chat box. And again, because we saw the previous poll results, it was so skewed, right? So some people felt that they did not go through any change, and that is completely fine because, like I said, a lot of people don't realize they are going through change. And sometimes we take a back seat and we keep observing, and that's fine. And a lot of times you will see that people were not even involved in the implementation of it, which is not good for the role of HR. Okay. So most of the people are here going to be affected, right? And I'm guessing that's very normal. Okay, we'll leave it on for another 30 seconds. And while we do this, when we move on to the slides, I'll keep the poll open and we'll look at it again in a short while. Okay, so please still continue voting. That's okay. And you see, again, if you look at the results, you will see that we barely have nobody or very few people who actually implemented that change. So coming back to your question, Dilbar, is does HR have a role to play? Where do we fit in? Is that fit really has to be something to do in the when we were involved in the change, right? When I say we, I say HR or people managers. So let's look at this one very interesting statistic that I came across. It was in the Deloitte Global Human Capital Trends. And if you haven't read that report, feel free to do so. It's on the Deloitte website. It's the 2020 report. It's a very interesting report. So go through it. So this is one statistic that I really loved in shift in HR's role in 2020-2021. So from the one that was surveyed, 55%, that's more than half of the professionals said that HR will change substantially in next 12 to 18 months, which is now. So HR is currently going through a transformation, right? And I think we all agree with that. If you look at the second statistic, it's 75%, so almost 3/4 of the respondents said that change will become a key expansion of HR's accountability, which means that we were not focusing enough as HR on change. And that's the shift we are talking about. Did we have change as an accountability for us as HR? Maybe not, maybe yes. But again, I would like to hear from people who are watching us. If you actually did implement change, just type in the chat box and say yes, and you should be very proud of it if you did it. So just say it here, and we will ask you how. So how is HR helping in driving this change? So where are we? Where do we stand? What's that connection? Can we really make change a success as HR? And the answer is yes, because we are going to be in the driver's seat. We are going to be changing the gears when it comes to change management. And we will see how. So I have this very interesting model, which is HR's role in change management. And let's look at each of these elements. And again, while I'm talking, if you want to put in your chat box, if you went through any of this while you were working in the last 12 to 18 months, that will be wonderful to know. So first thing first, HR has to be a member of the change management team. Like I said before, I don't think HR was really involved or they even knew. And HR is an evolving role, right? If you look at HR 10 years back, maybe even let's look 40 years back, it was personal development. We were doing a lot of paperwork. We were doing a lot of payroll. We were just paying salaries, and that's it. It transformed. We moved to human resources, where we started becoming more involved in the resource of human capital. And now we are shifting more towards something that is an active member of making transformations. So that's human capital transformation. It is transformation probably for talent. It could be transformation for change. It could be transformation of business. So HR, yes, you have to be an active member of that committee. And there are companies who started building committees of change management also within the companies last year. The second thing is you have to be a coach to somebody who is even leading change. So when I say that, I also want to point out that does not mean that change management entirely becomes HR's role, right? The managers, the line managers, the leaders, they all have to lead the change as well. And HR becomes the driver for it, but it is still the leader's job to make sure that they are leading that change. And then HR can become a coach to whoever is leading that change internally, right? Third one is providing trainings on change management. So not necessarily to the leaders, also to the line managers. You remember we said before that change starts from yourself, right? So even as employee, as a workplace employee, somebody who is going in and out and is touching any point within your organization needs to know how to go and navigate through that change. So it's HR's job to make sure that all your workforce is ready to face that change. So are you providing that training on change management? The fourth one is building a process. So again, the process and the model for change management probably existed or has been built in the last few years in your company, or maybe even last year, or maybe it's currently being built. But are you involving as companies your HR department to be a part of that process? Because that's where it actually starts from. You have to make sure if you're developing a successful change management model, you need to communicate it well, you need to make sure it's implemented well, and you have to make sure that it is, you remember momentum, we said action, movement, and momentum. We need to make sure the momentum is constant there. So who is driving that momentum? It's HR, right? And then finally, inside the HR function. So if you look at yourself as HR, it has always been a function which has been taking care of internal and external customers. And when we say internal customers, these are your employees inside your organization. External is whoever your organization is touching outside in the community. So internal and external customers. So that is why internally also, HR has to make sure that change also happens within the HR function. So you can't be going out saying that, as HR, I want to go and change my organization. I want to lead that change. I want to implement that change. But if your HR processes do not fit that change, you will not be able to move with that same momentum, right? Makes sense? And maybe at this stage, I will probably take that question because it makes a little bit of sense here, which is the first one. So what extent change management can affect employees' motivation and retention in organization? And again, this is HR's job, and that's why I'll answer this first, is it does affect motivation a lot and retention a lot. So if you remember, we said in the beginning that if you do not implement the change management model effectively, if your change is not effective, you will end up losing your employees. I don't have the statistic on the slide, but I'm happy to send it to you later on, is there is a Forbes report that talks about 72% of employee turnover, 72%, because the change management process or the model was not effective. So if you are not effective, it is not going to work. So forget the motivation. You're not even going to retain those employees anymore in your company. They're going to start looking at other options. And the other thing is also is if you do not communicate that change well to your employees at the right time, at the right place, it is going to absolutely affect your employees' morale. So not just its implementation, it's also communication, which is very important. So I think the other ones we will look at it at a later stage. We will just probably move on with the next question.
Okay, so that is clearly seen that HR has a role in change management. Sometimes it's a part of the project just to implement things that we have to implement in the company, but sometimes we should lead change ourselves because it's a kind of HR related part of the business. But I think even if our participants didn't claim that they have participated in the change management process during these 2 years, actually most HRs in our country, they have participated and supported change management practices in companies, flexible working hours, working from home, using technology, and helping people in the companies learning the kind of technology to work from home, etc. HR is involved in this kind of processes intensely.
Absolutely.
So we know the role of HR, but it would be more interesting to see real life examples of companies. Can you please tell us something about the best practices of typical companies, giving some typical examples of the famous companies?
Yeah, and these stories, I love them, right? I love when I see great case studies come up and successful change management that happens, successful transformation programs that happen, and they have happened in the last many years as well, not just during the pandemic. So we have to give credit to a lot of companies. And I have to tell you that even when I was in Azerbaijan, I was talking to so many different companies while I was there, and I've been in touch with so many different companies, whether it's the Azerbaijan Railways, whether it's SOCAR, whether even it's different energy companies and state-owned companies. And I think the way they have handled, and I've spoken to so many employees from there, it's just amazing how you guys have handled it in a country. And I know that it is not only the pandemic that hit the country last year. There were other challenges that were faced. There were other things that happened at the same time. And still getting out of that is something which is a success. And that's why I like this quote is, success, it requires agility. It requires you to rethink, to reimagine, to react, to reinvent. And when you do all these things, when you are redeveloping yourself, that's when you can make that success happen as an organization, right? And show you another study here, which was done by McKinsey, where they said that they surveyed HR professionals, and the HR leaders said their top 3 priorities for the next 2 years is going to be responding with agility or driving leadership, culture, and employee experience. So those 2 things make up more than 50% of what HR's focus is going to be. Again, this is focused towards agility and identity because that's what will bring you that success. But the other thing here is, how is this change successful? So the ones who have made it happen have made it happen, and those are the examples that we will talk about. There are a lot, but 50% of the change processes are a clear failure, and that's not a great rate. right? It's not a great rate. It's only 34% that have actually, as per this Gartner report, have implemented their change successfully within an organization in the last couple of years. So let's look at who are the organizations, and I've picked out in this 2 ones which were really affecting all of us in both ways, even on the organization front as well as even as in our daily lives. So we will look at one which is consumer goods, and then we will look at an example from an airline, which is my favorite one. To be very honest, it's not being able to fly is a pain for someone who loves to travel, right? And I'm sure you all agree with that. So which organizations have become successful is the ones who are focusing on staying fit for the pandemic future. And I know when I give you these examples, you may feel that your organization was one of those. And again, I would love to hear those stories. If you have, just type them in. I would love to hear those stories. But before that, let me talk about the consumer goods, Unilever. Right? We have all heard about Unilever. It's a global consumer good organization. I love this quote, which comes from their CHRO. His name is Lena Nair. She says, "We are all in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat," which again means one size does not fit all, which is so important to know. So what did Unilever do differently? They started moving from traditional employment models to something that fits to each person's requirement. Now, I know that in every country, in every company, in every industry, you have a specific employment model that you hire them as full-time, you hire them as part-time, you hire interns, you hire remote workers, contractors. So did we change that model to make sure that we are still using the talent that we need for us? And that's exactly what Unilever did. They started changing their models on a literally month-to-month basis, making sure they will still be able to use the talent that they need for their business success. Second is working with speed. Again, here it's agility and resilience, and course correction, which is so important. Do you remember as HR, we also do something called as performance reviews, right? And do you remember going through performance reviews at one point even once a year, but sometimes we go through it every quarter, right? Sometimes we go it twice a year, sometimes it's only annual, but it's changing because we want real-time feedback. We don't want to wait for 3 months, 6 months to find out how I did on my job. And that's course correction. That's exactly what Unilever implemented to make sure that let's assess and keep assessing what we are doing right and wrong as we go along. The third thing they did is creating personalized solutions. So are we making sure that not everybody is, the solutions that people get or our employees get or our functions are getting are fit to them? So if somebody is saying that my team cannot work from home because we have to be in the warehouse, we have to be dispatching material. So I cannot tell them that, no, you have to work from home because it's a company policy. No, are we creating a solution for that department? And it's the same for all other industries, right? And they did come to something called as a social commitment. And that social commitment is making sure that your employees are ready for the future. Once the pandemic is gone, once the new normal and the new way of working has set in, can your employees still fit in? So you have to make sure that they are coached and trained and they are ready and upskilled to that level. So I'm sure a lot of these things were done by your organizations as well, I'm very sure. But if there is something that comes to you as a takeaway, feel free to do that. And if there's something I need to learn, please put that in as well. And we'll look quickly at Qantas as an example. So Qantas is an Australian airline. It's their national carrier. And we all know airlines were hit really bad. A lot of aircrafts had to be grounded in the last year or so. A lot of airlines are still grounded. The travel has still not returned to the normalcy. And if there is any industry that saw a lot of cut down in their workforce, was airlines, was service industry, right? Airlines was the hardest hit. And in that, how did Qantas, they are coming back, they have reported profits starting from last quarter, despite their borders being closed. And how did they do it? So number one was, it's more leadership focused in their case study, is where their leadership and management were committed to deal with every issue of their people personally. They did not decentralize anything. They did not say, this is not my issue, I'm not going to take it. There was an open door policy. So whether you are in HR or not in HR, if you are a CEO, COO, they started taking those issues personally. The second thing was communication, and we spoke about communication a couple of times before. But when these communication come from leaders, it has the maximum impact. So making sure those communications were done regularly only allowed for reinforcement of trust. Also, we said that a lot of their staff, about 6,000 of their staff was let go, and 15,000 of them were asked to sit at home and not work. So can you imagine that much staff? And what they did is they provided secondary employment. So what do you mean by secondary employment? Is they created a platform within their organization where these employees who are not currently working or were laid off could find something else for a short period of time or for part-time and still continue working in other essential industry where their skills can be used. So that's something that the organization pushed for. And finally, they were acting with sense of urgency. So nobody was saying, okay, my job is to just make sure that I'm taking care of workforce management. My job is to take care of compensation. My job is only training, or my job is only overlooking my staff. But they were looking at the sense of urgency and making sure that they were stepping in to do whatever was needed. So the ability to be agile with whatever you had at that time was important for their recovery. And based on that, today they are again back into the air. They are again, they have ended up rehiring 3,000 or 50% of their staff back into their workforce, which is again a great news for an industry like an airline, right? So that's something that I really like about that. And before we get to the final takeaways and the questions, here is something I wanted to, you remember I said I'll give you something in the end. So here is something where it's a quote that talks about one country, and I want you to guess which country is this. The willingness and ability to learn from changes had put this country on a fast track to help them become global leader of the fourth industrial revolution. Who do you think is this country? Is this, do you want to take a guess? Anybody wants to take a guess?
I have an idea here, but I don't know if it's correct. USA?
That's okay, it's a guess. You don't have to be right.
Maybe China, maybe USA. So
maybe China, yeah, maybe USA. Okay. Anyone else wants to take a guess? Who could be a country that's leading and changed a lot and had that willingness and ability to change and become a leader in the fourth industrial revolution? Okay.
Could be India.
Could be India. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And we do have rankings. Okay. Somebody also thinks China. Leila, you think China. Okay. And we do have rankings for this, and these rankings come from the UNDP, which is the United Nations Development Program, right? Because they were tracking so many of these statistics. So interestingly enough, let's look at, it was Azerbaijan. So, so this is something
I wasn't ready, actually.
You did not know that, exactly. And I did not know that either. But this is something which came from your ministry, and I will be happy to share this report with you in the end, which you can circulate. And this is something you should be very proud of, is although we had rankings, and the ones who said India, China, US, Europe, they did a great job. Germany, France, even the UAE for that matter, did a great job of changing and adapting. But I know there were some challenges because of the amount of population. If you look at countries like India and China, even if they try to progress with the amount of population they have in, it is difficult to get to that level of being perfect, and no nation is perfect. But if you look at statistics of that curve of the willingness to learn from changes, it was Azerbaijan that was moving and tracking at one of the highest, or the top 3 countries in the world. So yes, when you tell me all those examples from Azerbaijan, I absolutely agree that there has been a lot of resilience, a lot of agility shown. And like I said, I know there was not 1 or 2 challenges. There were several of them that came in there. And the country has been very resilient and agile to deal with it.
So we've talked about some of the key takeaways, but are there any key findings in here from these studies? And can you please summarize key learnings for this session?
Sure, and I've tried to put something which are, again, I'm going to be a bit selfish here because I put the ones that I felt were the best, and there could be things that you feel were other takeaways that work for you. But number 1, I think, is to make sure that you are building that adaptability muscle for yourself. You know how you go to a gym and you make sure you were fit. Everybody in the pandemic wanted to stay fit. So same way, you have to make sure that you are staying adaptable throughout, so that if anything like that comes later on and is hit, that you have that adaptability to navigate through this change. Second, as an HR person, as an HR leader, you are the ones who know your people best. You are the ones who know your organization the best. And we said change starts with your people. It always starts from yourself. Then second, it goes to your people. So make sure that you are the drivers of that change. Don't leave that job for someone else. You have to be the drivers of that change. Third, make sure you're focusing on upskilling and reskilling your talent. What worked last year may not work next year. So you have to constantly create those skill hubs, constantly make sure that learning is happening. Are you giving them the right tools to make sure they can face this type of challenge when they move into another pandemic? And we hope that doesn't happen, but it could be anything else, right? And finally, I think that's my favorite quote, is one size does not fit all. We are not in the same storm. So it might be the same pandemic that hit the world, but you have to find the approach or the model that works for you the best. You have to make sure that it is something that you are doing that's working for you. You can look at examples for other companies, learn best practices, but use an approach that works for you internally. Yeah. So again, we will look at the questions now. I will start looking at some questions that were posted here. We answered Sema's question. Yes.
And Nasir Mustafayev has a question. And he
Okay.
asks, yes, we can encourage employees to work from home, and how can we improve the communication?
Yeah, and this is so interesting because, again, some of the things I keep hearing or I have heard in the past, and some of the research also shows, is remote work employees can be of two types. One is they are so excited to come on Zoom calls. They will come before you, they are there, they have those lovely backgrounds, they are so involved, they are so engaged. And then there are other ones who don't want to even turn on their cameras because they feel like, maybe I'm sleeping, maybe I don't want people to watch what I'm doing. So they are the ones, you know, they don't want to say anything. So you can really find out the ones who are engaged and not engaged. But if you want to encourage workers who are working from home, I think one of the things that's very important is make sure that they have activities which will keep them engaged. You have to start focusing on employee engagement, and you have to be innovative with it. We did employee engagement before where we had those lunches together. Try virtual lunches, that helps. There are some times where you can even set up one-on-ones as leaders or even as HR. Try to find out if somebody is not giving that outcome that you want from them or you are expecting from them as a manager. Have one-on-one conversations. Try and find innovative ways to engage them, to make sure that they are influencing each other. Very important as well. Give them the opportunity to make decisions. And I'm not saying larger decisions, but don't try to micromanage somebody, especially when that person is working remotely. You have to make sure that you give them that flexibility, not just the flexibility of working from somewhere, but the flexibility of allowing them to make decisions or take those calls that they always needed to take, right? So that's what I would say. So we'll quickly look at another question also. I know you're coming close to.
Again, about resistance to change.
Yes.
Yes, resist change.
Yeah, I think again, it's very similar to. Part of the answer would be very similar to what we said. One is engagement, but the other one is communication and feedback. I think as HR, if you feel somebody is just bashing your change, they don't want it, they don't accept it. And remember, this resistance can be from both sides. It could be that, okay, this is a perfect change that you have adopted for your company where you're giving them the flexibility, but there is an employee who doesn't want to work from home because he or she says that I cannot work at home because I always fall asleep. I can't do it. But on the other hand, it could also be where the employee is forcing you to come to an office and the employee says, I am not feeling safe to come to work. So you have to remember it's both sides, and both sides need to be equated. They need to be equal when you are resisting that change. So we'll look at the first scenario. So if an employee is resisting that change, what do you do? Is one, again, have that open, honest communication. Ask for the feedback. Ask that question, why? Don't try to push something on an employee without finding out there could be a serious challenge. There could be an issue within his or her family where he or she is not doing it. Maybe it's the way they work. And as HR, find out what you can do to make sure that that person is having a flexibility and find a middle ground that works for both. You cannot push the employee at one side, and neither you should allow the employee to push you in a direction to get what they want. So find a middle ground. So if somebody is falling asleep every time they are working from home, find a way if they can work in chunks of hours, right? So find a way if they can work for an hour, take a break for 15 minutes, work for another hour. Maybe the work hours get longer in total, but they may not feel it because they are taking those breaks in between. So find innovative ways. And as employers also, I would say, don't push your policies on your employees. Find out this is the time where your employees need to be focused on their mental well-being needs to be taken care of. Their emotional health needs to be taken care of. So have that communication, whether it's one-on-one, make sure that employee talks and gives you the feedback, always. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So when our employees resist the change, we firstly should analyze what are the main ground reasons to the resistance. Then we should act on it. Great.
Yep.
Thanks a lot for this really informative and interesting session. And thanks to participants for joining and staying with us till the end of the webinar.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. This is one word I learned when I was in Azerbaijan, and I kept using it everywhere. It's çok sağ olun. I love how all you operate. I love the way the profession of HR is growing in that country and around as well. I love the way you influence others and you have that hunger of learning. And I think end of the day for me and my organization also, that's something that we really want to do is support you in your learning journey. We really want to hear from you. So I don't want to end this conversation here saying that you're not going to see me again, but please, if you have any questions, feel free to, my contact details are up on the screen. Feel free to reach out. That mobile number is also a WhatsApp number. If you are a technology freak and you love to be on WhatsApp all the time, feel free to drop me a note. Also follow our page on LinkedIn, and we post a lot of takeaways there as well. So we just want to make sure that this conversation continues. So again, thank you very much. You guys are amazing, and hopefully we will see each other again very, very soon.
Thanks a lot. Participants, please, if you have questions, you still can ask. And if you don't have questions, so we can end the session.
Great, thank you. And if there is anything else that you need from me, if there are reports or questions or some statistics that you felt you wanted to go more into detail, maybe you can just either drop me a line or just ask the team at AİRA. Just tell them that you need this from the webinar, and I'll be happy to share. Yeah. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dipti, for the session. It was very informative. I am attending from India. However, my markets are UAE and APAC. So I'll get in touch with you sometime. Yeah.
Sure, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice day. Yeah.
Have a great evening.
Thanks. Bye. Bye. You too. Have a great evening.
Thanks a lot for joining. Now you are free to leave. Actually, I don't want to end or finish the session, but I should do it. I have to do this. Okay. See you in our next webinars. Thanks for joining. Have a nice week. We have 3 days in front of us. So that's it.
Great. Thank you very much. Have a great evening, everyone.